Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Survival Guide to Minecraft 1.15. In this video, I'll be showing you all of the survival relevant changes in Minecraft for the 1.15 update, also known as the Buzzy Bees update. And in case you're new to the game or coming back from a long hiatus, I have Ultimate Survival Guides for every major Minecraft update, dating all the way back to the Minecraft 1.8 update. I've decided to split up this video into 5 different categories. The categories we'll be covering today are: first, new blocks, new items, and new recipes in Minecraft 1.15. Second, new mobs, namely bees, and mob changes to the game. Third, new game mechanics introduced with this update. Fourth, the changes to world generation this update. And fifth, everybody's favorite, miscellaneous category, where anything that doesn't fit in any previous category will be. So, there are timestamps in the description. Click on those to go to the category you'd like to see, or just wait, and let's get started. Alright guys, so first block we're taking a look at here in this new update is the bee nest. So the bee nest looks like this. You can find this naturally generating in trees in the plains, sunflower plains, and the flower forest biome. And the bee nest, as it implies, is a nest for bees. So bees are found in and around the bee nest. Now, there's a couple different states the bee nest can be in when you find it. It can be in this state here where there's honey level 0. If I hit F3, you can see honey level 0 on the right-hand side. And there's actually 5 honey levels. When it reaches the 5th level, it changes its texture to this sort of thing where you can see the honey inside the nest itself. Now, bee nests have to be harvested with a silk touch tool. You can see if I try and harvest it with this unenchanted axe, you see it just simply breaks the bee nest, and also bees nearby will become aggravated toward you. So yeah, you want to make sure you're using a silk touch tool. So if you do use a silk touch tool like I'll use here, you can see it does drop the bee nest at that point. It's also worth noting that if you did break your bee nest with silk touch, it'll preserve both the honey level of the bee nest and also the bees inside. So if we just wait here for a minute, we should see some bees pop out of this honey nest that we just had in our inventory a few moments ago. Yep, just like that. So this bee was preserved inside the bee nest, so that's a great way to move bees. Just make sure that they're all inside the bee nest before you actually move the bee nest itself. Bee nests are also important because you can gather things like honey bottles from them simply by right-clicking them with an empty glass bottle, just like so. So there you have it. Got my honey. And it also allows you to get honeycomb by simply right-clicking the bee nest with shears. So there you go. Got some honeycomb there, and you also see that the bees are angry. So whenever you have bees inside a nest or also a beehive, and you right-click them with either a bottle or a shear, you gotta be careful because the bees are gonna come after you. It's also worth noting that bee nests will actually drip honey when they're full underneath of them. And if you actually put a lit campfire underneath of them, you can harvest from the bee nest or the beehive, which I'll show you in a minute, without fear of the bees being retaliatory against you. So here you can see I just harvested this one, got the honey, also got an advancement, and we also can harvest this one here, like so, without the bees retaliating against us. So yeah, if you put a campfire under your beehives, then you can safely harvest the goods from them. A few other things about the bee nests and the beehives. Both will output a signal strength from a comparator based upon what their honey level is. So it can be anything from level 1 to level 5. So yeah, we have a level 5 right here, which is why it's outputting this signal strength. And also, you can use dispensers to harvest honey and honeycomb. So if you have a glass bottle inside a dispenser, and the dispenser is pointed at a nest or hive with honey level 5, you can power it, and you'll see it picked up the honey bottle, and yeah, put it back into the dispenser right there. And also, this went back down to 0, so you see this output went down to 0. And then the same thing for the honeycomb, except you need shears in your dispenser. And you'll see that it doesn't put the honeycomb into the dispenser. Instead, it drops the honeycomb nearby. So yeah, you can presumably pick it up either yourself or via like a hopper minecart or something like that. So now you have honey bottles and honeycomb. What can you do with these? Well, there's a couple things you can do. Number one, with the honey bottle, you can actually eat it. So if I eat this, there you go. You see it restores 3 drumsticks of hunger. And the cool thing about it is it has a pretty unique property. So one unique thing about honey bottles is that, unlike potions, you can actually stack these to 16. So you can carry a lot of them in a small space. You can also eat honey similar to chorus fruit while you're not hungry. So you can see I'm currently not hungry, but I can still eat the honey. And of course the bottle returns to my inventory. So yeah, pretty interesting new food there in the honey bottle. It's also worth noting that you can use honey bottles to craft sugar. So if I put 1 honey bottle into the crafting table, you see I get 3 sugar back. And so that is a new way to get sugar in the game. Another useful thing about the honey bottle is that it actually cures poison. So if I splash myself with poison here, and then I quickly eat a honey bottle, you'll see it actually gets rid of the poison for me. So that is also another great use of the honey bottle. Honey bottles also have another use, and that is to craft the honey block. So 4 honey bottles will get you your honey block right there. And you'll see the 4 bottles do indeed stay in the crafting window, and so you can remove those once you have that. You can also then craft the honey block back into honey bottles just by doing the exact opposite. So honey block and 4 glass bottles gives you 4 honey bottles. So you can go back and forth that way between honey blocks and honey bottles if you so desire. So that's a pretty useful tip to know. But let's talk now about this honey block. So the honey block is probably one of the most useful blocks in Minecraft. In fact, I have a video of the same name which details why. But the honey block, you can place it down and break it with just your fist. You don't need a tool or anything, and it breaks pretty much instantly. Also, when you run over the honey block, you'll see you actually get slowed down quite significantly. So it's sort of sticking to you, and so you can't move as quickly as you otherwise would normally. Like for instance, if I sprint here, you can see there's an obvious slowdown when I walk on honey blocks. Also, you can't jump very high when you're on honey blocks. So if I try and jump up this 1 block height right here, see, can't do it. Cannot jump up this 1 block gap. And this also applies to mobs. Mobs will also not be able to jump very high when they're on the honey block. Another unique property of the honey block is that you can actually slide down it. So if I slide down it like this, you can see not only do I slide rather slowly, and I can safely make my way to the ground, but I also get an advancement called Sticky Situation. So yeah, that's a cool property of these slime blocks. And also, this does apply to items. So if I throw an item on here, see the item just slides right on down it, just like so, which is quite nice. Honey blocks also reduce fall damage. So if I fall from a height that would normally kill me here, you'll see, yep, got the fall damage reduced, and the honey blocks save me. So yeah, they also reduce fall damage when you fall from height. Honey blocks are somewhat similar to slime blocks in that they can move blocks adjacent to them with them when they're pushed or pulled by a piston. So if I go ahead and just press this, you'll see these diamond blocks are pushed and pulled along with the honey blocks. But unlike slime blocks, they can also do the same with entities. So things like, let's say, armor stands or items, they also get pushed or pulled. And this also applies to things like mobs. So if I go ahead and just spawn in a creeper here, you'll see the creeper gets pulled along with the honey blocks as well. So that is a unique property right there of honey blocks, which is fairly useful. Another cool thing about honey blocks is that mobs prefer not to walk on them. You can clearly see that here, as all the mobs are basically jammed into the side where they can walk on regular grass blocks. And yeah, most of them are staying off of the honey block area. It's also very useful to know that despite both blocks being sticky, slime blocks and honey blocks do not stick to one another, as you can see right here. A couple other small things about the honey block. The honey block itself is not actually a full block. So you can see here I'm at level 64 in height. If I walk onto the honey block, I'm at 63.9375. So it's not a full block, and it's not a full block on the side either, which means it's actually quite useful for aligning items if you're using, for instance, like a water stream to transport items. So that's a useful thing to know. And also, it does not transmit a redstone signal through it because it is transparent. So yeah, just be aware of those things as well. The other thing we got from the bee nest was honeycomb. So you can use honeycomb for a few different things. First off, we have the honeycomb block, which is made just with honeycomb in the 2x2 like this. That gets you your honeycomb block. And the honeycomb block is primarily a decorative block. It's a full block, and it looks like this, but it doesn't have any other unique properties. The other thing you can craft with the honeycomb is actually a beehive. So beehives are made with 6 planks and 3 honeycomb just like this. That gets you your beehive. And beehives are exactly the same as bees' nests, except that you can actually harvest the beehive here without having silk touch on your tool. So if I just go ahead and harvest it, yeah, you see it drops its item. Yeah, I didn't need Silk Touch to do that. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as the bee's nest, which I showed earlier. So those are the bee hives, player-crafted bees nests. The composter has had its recipe changed in this update, so now the composter is crafted with 7 slabs just like this. Makes your composter. Also, Dark Prismarine has had its recipe changed, so instead of using a ink sac surrounded by Prismarine shards, it's now a black dye surrounded by Prismarine shards to get your Dark Prismarine. Another recipe change is that you can now craft stripped wood directly, so you now need 4 stripped logs, and that gets you 3 stripped wood. Next up, the new mobs and mob changes. So first of all, we have the bees. Bees are the new mob in the game, the primary new mob for this update. You can see they have some flapping wings, they got some antennae, they got a stinger on the back, they also have some tiny little legs down there. Now, bees live in bee nests in the plains, sunflower plains, and flower forest. They live in the nest that looks like this. And these nests will be found in trees naturally, but you can move them with Silk Touch, as I showed in the previous section. They can also live in beehives, which are player-crafted versions of the bee nests. There's a maximum of 3 bees per nest or hive, so you can't have any more than that per nest or hive. So yeah, any more than that, and basically the bees will start to wander and look for a different nest or hive. You can breed and lead bees with flowers, so you can see here I have a flower in my hand and a bunch of bees are coming toward me. All you have to do is right click on them and you see the hard particles show up. Then if we wait a minute here, yep, you'll see a baby bee was just born there, and we also got the advancement, the parrots and the bats for breeding these guys. And so it can be done with any sort of flower. I'll just breed up 2 more right here. There we go. And these bees can be bred every 5 minutes, and it takes 20 minutes for the baby bees to grow up. However, if you have flowers, you can actually accelerate the growth by clicking on a baby bee. And so, yeah, you can actually speed this up by 5% for every time you click and feed the baby bee a flower. So that's pretty cool. So the way that bees work, they basically go out and find flowers from their nest or hive, and they'll become pollinated like this, and you see as they fly over, their pollen can sometimes drop on crops, and that will actually cause the crops to be bone meal, essentially, and grow up by one growth stage. So that is pretty useful that you can actually use bees to grow crops. And also, when the pollinated bees actually go into their nest and hive, and then they re-emerge, that actually increases the nest or hive honey level by 1. And yeah, you see the crop growth right there from that pollinated bee dropping pollen on top of the crops. So the bees are naturally passive, but what happens if you actually attack a bee? Well, if I hit this bee, you'll see his eyes become red, and he starts to track me, and he wants to sting me, essentially. So I'm just going to let him sting me. You'll see he flips over and stings me, and now this bee is actually missing his stinger, and has also poisoned me. So if I look in here, I get poisoned for several seconds, and yeah, this will actually do some damage to me. So you have to be a little bit careful of bees. But I just want to show you, yeah, no stinger on this bee anymore, which means that this bee is actually going to die within about 50 to 60 seconds. So if we just wait here, we should see this bee die as he's already stung me. Yep, there it was right there. So that bee that stung me just died right there. Now it's also worth noting that if you attack bees that have multiple bees nearby, other bees will also become angry. So you see all these bees now are actually angry toward me because I hit one of them. So it's sort of like a swarm of bees come after you. Same thing happens if you break their beehive or bee nest. Any of the bees in that hive or nest will start to come after you. Now the bees are not too terribly difficult to take on. They only have 10 hearts of health. And they also are affected by the Bane of Arthropods enchantment, which I have on this sword right here. So, yeah, they're pretty easy to take on, but yeah, you do have to be careful because they do give you poison, which can take you down pretty low if you're not careful. Bees inside the nest or hive will become passive toward you if you have a campfire underneath the hive or nest and then try to harvest something like honey, so like I just did there. However, if you don't have a campfire under there and you try and take some honey, you'll see that bees will come out and attack you. And the same thing happens when you try to shear some honeycomb out of a hive or nest, so be very careful with that. A few other interesting things about bees. If we go ahead and set the time to night, you will see that the bees will actually go into their hives at night. So this is one final bee here, and once this bee goes in here, I think all the bees will actually be in the hive or nest. And then once we have, let's just go ahead and say we'll set it to noon. You'll see the bees should slowly begin to reemerge. Yep, there they come. Sweet. So yeah, bees go into their hive at night. Another interesting fact about bees is that bees do not like water. They will try to path away from water when they can, and if it ends up raining, so we'll do /weather rain, you'll see that the bees will quickly return to their hives to avoid getting wet. So yeah, they go away and they don't come back out while it's raining until it clears up. So we'll just clear it up here, and then soon after it clears, we should see a couple of the bees emerge once more, just like that. So in short, it's a good time to pick up bee nests and bee hives when it's either night or when it's raining, and to pacify bees, use a campfire underneath. Another really important thing to know with bees is that bees can only enter the front of the beehive or bee nest. So the front is the side with the holes, so right here. So this one, bees can go in and out, but these three, because we have something in front of it, namely a comparator, the bees can't get in, the bees can't get out. So if you're having trouble and you're wondering why there's no bees, maybe your front is blocked. So if you do that, you'll see, boom, they instantly pop out. Same there, and same there. So make sure the front of your beehive and bee nest is clear of any and all objects or blocks. Iron golems have also changed this update. They will now have their texture crack as they get more and more damage. So if I just hit this guy a few times, yep, you'll see he becomes more damaged and more cracked as he takes more damage, but you can also now repair them with iron ingots. So each iron ingot restores 12.5 hearts of health, and so that means 4 iron ingots can restore him to full health. And every time he gets repaired, you'll hear that sound. So now I can't repair him any further, and now I right click and there's no sound that plays. So that's how you know you've repaired the golem to full health. Another interesting mob change is that parrots will now stay on your shoulder whenever you're riding an entity. So this includes things like horses, which you see here, and also things like minecarts or boats. And also parrots will now no longer imitate neutral mobs like endermen, zombie pigmen, polar bears, and wolves. So some cool changes to parrots in this update. Another minor change is that mobs can now spawn in naturally as babies. So you see here we have 2 naturally spawned baby chickens right here, so that's pretty cool. We also have over here a baby sheep which naturally spawned in. So sheep, cows, pigs, foxes, chickens, wolves, llamas, and horses can all now spawn with baby variants as well as the adult variants. There's also been one change to the librarian villager. The librarian villager will now sell 1 bookshelf for 9 emeralds instead of 3 bookshelves for 6 emeralds. If a zombie villager picked up items, so for instance this guy picked up a whole bunch of diamond gear and a diamond sword, and then is cured, then that mob will then drop all of its items once it is converted into a villager once more, and you can pick up all the items. Another small change to a mob is that foxes can now generate in all types of taiga biomes, including the giant tree taiga biome. Villagers can only restock 2 times per day now, which means that villager trading has been significantly nerfed in this update. If the player now tries to sleep in a bed that a villager is currently occupying, the villager is actually kicked out, and the player can then get in. You can also reset your spawn point during the day by simply right-clicking on the bed, and you'll see it says Respawn Point Set in the chat. Sneak and sprint inputs can now be switched between hold and toggle mode. And this is quite relevant to survival Minecraft because there's a lot of things you can do with this that you otherwise couldn't. So, for instance, let's just say we are on a PvP server and we wanted to access this chest while remaining crouched. Well, typically you can't do that, right? So if I go ahead and access this, I'm holding shift, still holding shift, but I actually have just stood up, and now my name tag is visible to everybody in the immediate vicinity. Not ideal, but what I can do now is go into options, accessibility settings, and change this sneak to sneak toggle. And so now when I toggle sneak on, I'll remain sneaking. So I'm no longer holding shift even. And so now I can access this chest no problem and remain shifting. So that's actually a pretty good advantage to have in PvP. Let me just toggle it off now. I can also, if I'm say working on a building somewhere and I'm worried about falling off the edge, you know, typically if you were on hold, you'd have to hold shift the entire time so as not to fall off the edge here. But now if I come over here, change this to toggle shift on, now I'm not even holding shift. My pinky is saved. I'm not going to wear my pinky out anymore. And I can just walk around the edge of the blocks pretty much free to do whatever I want because I won't fall off because I'm still I still have shift toggled on. And then when I'm done, I can just untoggle it and then just go about my way. And the same thing you can do with sprint. So you can start sprinting immediately without having to toggle it on and off or hold sprint the entire time. So that's pretty useful, and yeah, a big change actually for survival Minecraft. Endstone bricks have been changed so they have the same hardness and blast resistance as endstone, as you can see in these tests here. There you go. So yeah, same pattern despite the fact that one is endstone bricks and the other is endstone. So good consistency change right there. Blocks that can be manually placed onto farmland, such as end rods or carpets or fence gates, can now also be pushed onto farmland without it reverting to dirt. So if I just go ahead and put down a fence gate here, a carpet here, and a end rod here, and then we power these, you'll see that, yeah, when they're pushed on, they don't revert the farmland to dirt. Rail placement is now always facing the player instead of being directional. So if I switched my direction to facing this way, see the rail switches accordingly, and this applies to all different types of rails. So if I do that, that's what it looks like, and then same thing with the powered rail and the activator rail. When you now place wet sponge in the nether, it instantly dries out. Now on to world generation changes in this update. The first change we see is that sweetberry bushes can now generate in giant tree taiga biomes, whereas before they could only generate in normal taigas. Another small change to world generation is of course the bee nests, which are found in trees in the flower forest and also in the plains and sunflower plains. And birch trees will now once again generate in dark oak forest biomes. Bells will now ring when powered with the redstone signal. You can now put out a campfire with a shovel by right-clicking. In addition to harvesting honey bottles and also honeycomb from full bee nests and or beehives, dispensers can now also collect water bottles when they dispense a empty glass bottle into a block of water. So I'll just show you that here. So there you go. There's our water bottle right in there. And dispensers now have the ability to place armor stands. So we have armor stands in here. If I power this, you'll see dispensers place the armor stand right in front of them. Fire charges launched from dispensers can now also light campfires, just like so. Fireworks rockets dispensed from dispensers will now travel in the direction the dispenser is facing. So here I have a firework rocket here. Previously this would launch a firework out one block and then straight up, but now you'll see it actually fires it out horizontally before it explodes some distance away. And this actually works in every direction here. So you can see, yeah, the ones that are facing this way, the fireworks launches that way, and they go in pretty much a perfectly straight line from where they originate. So that is pretty cool. Iron doors must now be mined with the pickaxe for it to be dropped as an item. And if you don't have a pickaxe, you'll see you can still break it, but it just doesn't drop. Large ferns will now drop wheat seeds, as you saw right there. Pumpkin and melon seeds that are attached to the pumpkin or melon will now once again drop seeds when broken. Scaffolding blocks have had their burn time increased in a furnace. They can now smelt 2 items per scaffolding block rather than just a quarter of an item as it was previously. Boats, when used as fuel in furnaces, also now have an increased smelt time, and they now smelt 6 items instead of just 1. Opening your elytra is now much easier. For instance, right here, I can easily do it off of flat ground. And also, when you're moving upward, you can now open your elytra as well. So I just opened it up right there, and now I'm just going to float on away just like this. So, yeah, moving with the elytra and flying with the elytra, taking off in particular, is much easier. Enchanted tridents, like that one and this one in my hand, will now actually glint and appear enchanted. The bottom of waterlogged blocks, such as this slab here, will no longer show the water texture on the bottom. As you can see here, mobs can now once again spawn on things like redstone lamps, and can also spawn on things like jack-o'-lanterns now once more. Fences and walls will now no longer connect to closed shulker boxes. Another useful feature in this update is you can now shift click into the crafting table. So you can see right here, I just shift click those 2 stone into the crafting grid. And the priority goes, if you think of it as a number pad, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, just like that. So let's say I wanted to craft up a repeater. I just do this in the proper order, and voila, there we go. There's our repeaters. So no longer have to, manually drop and place items into the crafting grid. You can just shift click them in if you so desire. Carved pumpkins can now once again be enchanted with curses in survival mode. Endermen will no longer teleport on top of waterlogged slabs, even if there is no water on the actual top of the block. And this is particularly useful in case you build anything like a ender pearl farm or something similar in your own world, because that means you no longer have to do the double carpet trick like this to prevent endermen from teleporting to a location. Ender pearls will now remember their owner even after a reload of the game or chunks, which means you can now do something like this. So if I throw an ender pearl up and then just simply leave the world, I can then go back in, and when the pearl lands, it will then teleport me. And so this is actually very useful on servers, especially if you want to make something like an ender pearl stasis chamber, which can teleport you back to a location from a great distance away. Enchanted gear now glows much more prominently in the dark than it previously did, which allows you to spot enchanted players much more easily than you previously could. And just to show you, it does work on players as well. You can see it's glowing quite well on me. So there we have it, the ultimate survival guide to Minecraft 1.15. If you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like, as it does take a lot of time to put this together. And also, maybe consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. Anyways, for now, that's it for me. Once again, thank you very much for watching. This has been Cub. Goodbye.